My name is Bobby, and I've always been fascinated by the human psyche. What drives a person to do the things that they do? Today, I'm searching for the mansion, the one that was at the center of the biggest murder case that North Central Texas had ever seen. I'm here, but where is it? Sadly, it was demolished just a little over a year ago. I'm talking about the Stonegate Mansion, where in August of 1976, 4 people were shot by a disguised assailant hiding out in the house. 2 of them survived, 2 of them didn't. I've come to Fort Worth to try to figure out if T. Cullen Davis really was an innocent man, or if he got away with murder.
It will be a summer when 12 strangers will be asked to decide the fate of a wealthy Fort Worth man. Cullen Davis will plead not guilty to allegations by the state that he killed or scarred 4 people almost 1 year ago.
Trial for this murder case was as big as a Texas hairdo. T. Cullen Davis was charged with murder. But when you have as much money as Mr. Davis had during the 1970s, you'll find that enough money will buy you anything, even your freedom. The oil drilling lifestyle in north central Texas was never really as pump-worthy as it was portrayed on Dallas, but there was definitely oil tycoons among the Dallas-Fort Worth elite. One of the most successful of these was a man by the name of Kenneth W. Davis, also known as Stinky. He founded Ken Davis Industries International Incorporated, which manufactured goods from the petroleum industry. In doing this, he gathered an enormous wealth, always quickly pumping it back into the company and windmilling more dollars. He and his family lived in the Fort Worth area. Now, Stinky had 3 sons. The middle son was named Thomas Cullen Davis, later shortened to T. Cullen Davis. Cullen was totally programmed for the business world, and Stinky recognized this. As a junior at Texas A&M, Cullen began to reaffirm his father's intention that he, like his brothers, would enter into the family business. He married his first wife, Sandra Masters, in August of 1962. While at Ridgely Country Club one afternoon, Cullen and Sandra wanted to play tennis and needed 2 more players. The club was able to find them opponents. One of those opponents was a woman named Priscilla Wilburn. She was married. Her husband was Jack Wilburn, a successful used car dealer. Cullen was very taken by Priscilla, whose marriage to Jack was on the skids. Cullen and Sandra had also been having their share of problems as well, which gave Cullen and Priscilla something in common. Soon, their chemistry was beyond explosive, friends have said. After both couples separated, Priscilla and Cullen started seeing each other. Then, shortly after returning, Cullen and Priscilla started living in the Green Oaks Motel. They both finalized their divorces. They were married in 1968, on the same day that Kenneth Stinky Davis died. Stinky had left his company and fortune to all 3 of his sons equally. Cullen and Priscilla made a fascinating pair. Cullen was always well-dressed, clean-cut, and charming. Priscilla was seen often in exotically revealing clothes and was very outspoken with a grandeur personality. They were always the talk of Fort Worth. In addition to Cullen's 2 sons from his first marriage, Priscilla had a daughter from her first marriage and 2 children from her second marriage, including youngest daughter Andrea Wilburn. Cullen began collecting art with the same competitiveness that he played billiards. At the Art Spectrum in LA, he tossed out $350,000 for a jade pagoda. In 1972, Cullen initiated his grandest project of all, the construction of his and Priscilla's dream house. The $3.8 million mansion was constructed on a hill in the midst of 180 acres, partially bordering the 14th fairway of the Colonial Country Club golf course in West Fort Worth. They named it Stonegate Mansion. The house, which took 3.5 long years to complete, came to symbolize what was happening to their marriage. Great loads of money were spent, but somehow the thing just never quite came together. The house was overwhelming. The $3.8 million price tag included a huge glass-walled indoor pool and a lavish game room with foosball, pool, and billiard tables. Priscilla's bathroom was larger than many bedrooms. The walls were hot pink where they weren't mirrored, with a sunken marble tub under a huge crystal chandelier. Throughout the house, the walls and high angular ceilings were white, and there were paintings, mostly 19th century originals, hung everywhere, all in heavy ornate gold frames. There were pedestaled statues, oriental carvings, and other valuable trinkets just scattered throughout. On one wall in the living room hung a 1971 portrait by Wayne Ingram. It was actually a collage of portraits depicting both Cullen and Priscilla in various poses. Cullen appears stern and determined at the pool table, on the slopes, and in a business chair. Priscilla looks coy and seductive, curled in a chair, feet tucked under, or standing in some kind of animal miniskirt with knee boots. The couple's move into their dream house seemed to signal the beginning of serious problems for them. According to Priscilla, Cullen started getting real competitive around that time. When he lost at anything, whether it be a business deal or a game of billiards, his temper would flare. The crisis came in 1974 when Priscilla discovered that her jewelry was missing and confronted Cullen. He replied that it was in his office and was going to stay there for a while. Priscilla drove down to his office, parking her car in the middle of the street in downtown Fort Worth. A confrontation followed, leading to Cullen asking for a divorce. Priscilla stayed in the Stonegate while Cullen moved out. Soon after, Priscilla met Stan Farr. He was 6 foot 10 inches tall and a former basketball star at TSU. He had been manager of the Rhinestone Cowboy Club, a would-be concert promoter, and had dabbled in the land business with a few setbacks. By 1976, Stan had taken up residence in Stonegate. He and Priscilla were almost constant companions. Occasionally, they would run into Cullen, escorting his new girlfriend, Karen Master. Cullen and Karen had become quite the visible social figures in Fort Worth. They were seen at the Colonial Country Club, of course, and the Rangoon Racquet Club. Cullen and Priscilla both seemed to be presenting a show, at least of contentment with their new mates. But the divorce proceedings were becoming more bitter with every move. On August 2nd, domestic court judge Joe Eatson granted Priscilla a continuance because of ill health. The judge also awarded her a third increase in temporary alimony, an increase of $1,500 for a total monthly payment of $5,000. Now, what happened that night is a matter of opinion and a matter of who you want to believe. But here are the facts. Around 1 a.m., police received a call from a man named Clifford Jones who lived about 400 yards from Stonegate. He stated that Priscilla Davis was out on his front porch, bloodied and begging for help. An ambulance arrived shortly afterwards and tended to her wound. The medics later said that Priscilla told them that she was shot by her soon-to-be ex-husband, Cullen Davis. She said her boyfriend was shot too, as well as a friend of theirs who was trying to get in the house when all of this occurred. She told him that her husband had tried to disguise himself wearing all black and a woman's black wig. The medics took Priscilla to the hospital. Police arrived a few minutes later at the house. All they knew at this point was what Priscilla had told the medics. They searched the house to see if the assailant was still there. They cleared the crime scene, secured it, and reported that the assailant was gone. Right near the driveway outside the house, they found a man named Gus Gavrell lying in a pool of blood. A female named Beverly Bass, who was a friend of Priscilla's daughter Dee, was also there and clearly shaken up. Fortunately for her, she was uninjured. She told them that she and Gus had pulled into the driveway and saw Priscilla running away from the house, followed by a man dressed in a black woman's wig and all black clothes. She told police that the assailant looked like Priscilla's estranged husband, Cullen. Gus told police that he was shot after Beverly recognized the gunman as Cullen and called his name. Gus was rushed to the hospital while detectives continued to question Beverly. Inside the house, detectives found the body of Priscilla's boyfriend, Stan Farr. He had been shot 4 times. And in the basement, they made a shocking and heartbreaking discovery. On the floor was Priscilla's 12-year-old daughter, Andrea Wilburn. She had been shot in the chest. 2 separate eyewitnesses claim that the assailant was T. Cullen Davis. This was enough for police to locate him for questioning. It took me a little while to figure out where the house used to be, but I finally found it. After the trial, no one really ever lived in the house. It became a restaurant, and then more recently it was a wedding venue. And then the land was bought by a corporation that decided to demolish the property. I got that usual eerie feeling I get when I come to crime scenes. Looking at these hills, I could actually picture Priscilla running for her life down one of these hills toward the neighbor's house to try to get to safety. Cullen was in bed at home when the phone rang. Within hours, police crowded around his home. Davis was allowed to dress and emerged to ride, unencumbered by handcuffs. He posted bond immediately and was released the following afternoon. However, DA investigator Jim Kuykendall said that Davis posed as a flight risk and might try to skip town. So after 17 days of freedom, Cullen Davis was placed in the Tarrant County Jail to await the start of what would be the most sensational murder trial that Texas had ever seen.
The prosecution, headed by Assistant District Attorney Jack Strickland, wants the trial moved out of Fort Worth because of what Strickland calls a combination of influences which would favor Davis and prevent a fair trial.
I think that both sides are entitled to start from zero. Both sides are entitled to a fair trial, and I think that can best be done by going someplace else.
The prosecution rested at 4 this afternoon, and the defense finished the day by questioning a handful of media representatives from Dallas, who testified that coverage of the Davis case had been just as intensive in Dallas as in Fort Worth. The feeling is now that Judge Gordon Gray will order jury selection to begin in Fort Worth, and if that is unsuccessful, then he'll move the trial to another city. Testimony in the change of venue hearing resumes tomorrow morning at 9.
As head of his defense team, Cullen hired Richard Racehorse Haynes from Houston, Texas. Haynes immediately gained notoriety by his theatrics in the courtroom and flamboyant antics. As the prosecution began building their case against Davis, they realized that they had no tangible evidence to link him directly to the crime and had to depend solely upon eyewitness accounts, essentially the testimony of Priscilla Davis. Fortunately, Priscilla's wounds were not life-threatening and she survived the attack. After several attempts at finding an impartial jury in Fort Worth, Judge Tom Cave ordered the trial be moved 300 miles away to Amarillo, Texas.
The courthouse where Davis's standing trial was built in 1931 but has been remodeled within the last 2 years. Davis shares a two-man cell on the 8th floor, one of 2 floors used for maximum security jail cells. Davis's cell gets no direct sunlight, has steel walls on 3 sides, and has no special furnishings.
The trial began with testimony from Priscilla Davis. She told the jury that earlier in the evening, she and Stan had gone to dinner with a couple of friends and then to the racket club for drinks. They arrived home around 12:30. She recalled noticing that the security locks were off. Stan went upstairs to the bedroom while Priscilla went to the kitchen, where she noticed that the door leading to the basement was open and saw bloody prints on the wall. She screamed for Stan just before, she says, Cullen appeared, dressed in all black, wearing a woman's black wig, and holding his hands together with a plastic bag wrapped around them. He coldly said hi to her before lifting his hands to reveal a gun and shot her in the chest. Stan ran down the stairs where he and the assailant started struggling for the gun. The assailant fired a shot, Stan cried out, and the assailant fired again. Stan fell to the floor near Priscilla, and the assailant pumped 2 more shots into his body. Priscilla was able to stand up and escape from the mansion, running to the Joneses' house to get help. At this time, she wasn't aware that her 12-year-old daughter Andrea was dead in the basement. Once it came time for Racehorse Haynes to cross-examine Priscilla, he put her and her reputation through the ringer.
Priscilla Davis today concluded her 6th day of testimony in the capital murder trial of her estranged husband, charged with killing her daughter, Andrea Wilburn, and her lover, Stan Farr, and wounding her and 2 family friends at the Davis Mansion on August 2nd, 1976. She was questioned during the morning by prosecutors seeking to clarify her earlier testimony. In response to questions from District Attorney Tim Curry, she again identified Cullen Davis as her assailant. She also related that before their separation in the spring of 1974, Cullen had cussed out 10-year-old Andrea for her refusal to spend the weekend at the Davis Mansion, told her she was not welcome at the house, and he wanted everything he had given her returned. Defense attorney Richard Haynes took up questioning during the afternoon session and spent considerable time asking about Farr's financial situation when he moved into the mansion with Mrs. Davis. Haynes asked, he was dead broke, was he not? He owed everybody in town, did he not? Mrs. Davis said she knew of an $11,000 judgment against Farr, but said He paid for their dates.
Gus Gavril and Beverly Bass were called to the stand after Priscilla. Gus, whose legs ended up paralyzed by the gunshots, indicated that he recognized Cullen Davis at the scene, but only after Beverly Bass, the only other eyewitness, allegedly called out at some point during the shootings, "It's Mr. Davis." A major part of the defense's strategy was the testimony of Cullen's girlfriend, Karen Master, who claimed he was asleep in bed with her at the time the crimes were committed. However, her story changed between her interview with police, where she said she had taken a sleeping pill and was out cold most of the evening, and with the grand jury, where she reported being awake and alert during the time of the killings. It was a major discrepancy that the prosecution planned to exploit. It didn't take jurors long to make up their mind. The 12 citizens of Amarillo took 2 votes during 4.5 hours of deliberation. The first vote was 10-2 in favor of acquittal. The second was unanimous. So in November of 1977, Cullen Davis was found not guilty. Some say by reason of wealth.
Davis spent the night at the Hilton Inn, slept late, then held a noon luncheon today for friends, court bailiffs who have been his constant companions in Amarillo for months, and some of the jurors who didn't make it to last night's party. Following the luncheon, I talked with Davis about the trial.
In my mind, I think that we had the case won before we put on our first witness.
Davis also said he expects the district attorney's office to try to prosecute him on the charges still pending against him. But Davis said, "I think I have a leg up on them now."
Davis kept a low profile in the months following his acquittal. He would occasionally talk to reporters about the case, but for the most part, he had little to say. Prosecution seemed resigned to the fact that Cullen was probably going to walk free forever. But then, what a difference a year makes. It happened here. It's now a Denny's, but this location back in 1978 was Coco's Famous Hamburgers, which was actually Cullen Davis's favorite place to eat. On August 20th, 1978, a year to the day from the opening arguments of his murder trial, Cullen Davis was observed meeting with FBI informant David McCrory, who had approached the Bureau with the astonishing allegation that Cullen had hired him to kill more than a dozen people on an enemies list. Among the targets were Priscilla Davis, Bev, Gus, and the judge who was overseeing the still unresolved divorce process. McCrory was wearing a pair of microphones as he presented Cullen with evidence that Judge Joe Eatson had been killed. He presented Cullen with a photograph of Eatson in a blood-stained t-shirt lying in the back of a car trunk. He also had Eatson's judicial ID and driver's license.
It's August 20th, 1978. Time is 8:12 a.m. I've just installed a Nagra tape recorder on the person of David McCrory, and I personally inspected that recorder previous to its installation and found it to be in working order.
Who do you want to go next? I can never have gotten a hold of him to change any plans. I've got more on me right now than you can imagine. Okay, what are you going to do with these? I'm going to get rid of the mother. Good. Glad to hear it. All right. Who do you want next? The ones we talked about. Very well. All right. Now, you want Beverly Bass killed next quick, right? I don't want to make another mistake. You sure? Yeah, because he's going to operate again tonight. Oh. Well, hey, the man is good. He's the best I've ever seen. Just one problem. I haven't got the money lined up. How long will that take? I get it this week. I can get it in 2 days. I don't know whether I can keep him here 2 days or not, though. Got Judge Edson dead for you. Good. I'll get the rest of them dead for you. You want a bunch of people dead, right? All right. Am I right? All right, but then I help me too, okay? I have got the money. He has got the gun.
Within 45 minutes of the conversation, T. Cullen Davis was back behind bars, this time charged with solicitation to commit murder. The case was even more open and shut than the previous one, and prosecutors quickly went to trial. Cullen stuck with racehorse Haynes. This time, Haynes' fee would top $2 million. David McCrory had started out as an investigator for Cullen's divorce and said Cullen approached him about hiring a hitman. He also claimed that Davis promised to pay from $25,000 to $200,000 for the killings and that there were several plans. But instead of hiring a hitman, McCrory went to the FBI, who set up the sting. The trial began in Tarrant County in early 1979. Haynes called in Priscilla Davis, even though she was not a party to any of the events. He questioned FBI agents about their knowledge of Priscilla and her friends and tried to paint a picture that she had Davis framed. In closing arguments, Haynes claimed Davis was merely playing along with McCrory and was under the impression that he, not McCrory, was working for the FBI. Haynes is quoted as saying, "We all know that human beings communicate with each other in so many ways other than what they say. By a raise of the eyebrows, by a shrug of the shoulders, by a nonverbal gesture. These are not captured on a voice recording." This time it looked like T. Cullen Davis was going to pay for his alleged crimes. Everyone thought so. Even the defense team was working on the presumption that Cullen was going down and was busy planning the punishment phase, defense, and appeal. The prosecution was so confident of a conviction that it asked the judge to delay the announcement so that Judge Joe Eatson could be present in the courtroom. You see, the judge had actually staged the photo of him in the trunk.
The jury had deliberated nearly 15 and a half hours since Thursday morning before filing into the courtroom shortly before 11:30 with their decision. Davis stood as Judge Gordon Gray read the verdict of the 8-man, 3-woman jury. Not guilty. Pandemonium broke loose. Davis's relatives, friends, and supporters laughed or cried for joy.
Well, I was very apprehensive. I couldn't tell what the jury was thinking. One was crying and the others were kind of expressionless, and I didn't know what to think.
District Judge Joe Edson, the man prosecutors contended Davis wanted killed, heard the verdict and was escorted from the courtroom, visibly shaken. Later, contacted at his home, Judge Edson was in no mood to talk.
Now, I don't like this harassment.
Well, I'm not trying to harass you, Judge. We did want to ask if you did have anything to say. You don't?
I have nothing to say.
Fine, thank you.
After the verdict, Davis offered his thanks to jurors who had listened to 12 weeks of testimony.
Thank you very
Including
much.
his defense. He had been framed by a conspiracy involving Davis's ex-wife Priscilla and his former friend David McCrory, the state's star witness.
Appreciate it.
Asked if he had a message for his former pool-playing buddy, Davis quipped, "McCrory can go stew in his own juices as far as I'm concerned." Defense attorney Richard Haynes was jubilant after his third victory over the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office.
But prosecutors have to work with the facts that they have, and they can do no more with them than what they did. And I think they will have the same view I do, share the same view I do, and that is that the jury has spoken, and they presented the best case that they could present, and I'm sure that they will take the same position that I would take. They don't question the jury.
Davis and wife Karen left the courthouse shortly after noon. At the end of his other two trials, Davis headed to the ski slopes of Colorado, but not this time. Oh, he's planning to go around Thanksgiving, but as he put it, now I've got to go make some money so I can pay my attorneys.
Priscilla Davis talked to reporters in the living room of her Fort Worth home, the same home that has 3 bodyguards, burglar alarms in the windows, and a front door that claims to be monitored by a laser. Priscilla was quick to point out why she's had all this security and why she's keeping it.
My daughter came in and told me that she had heard a bulletin, and there was immediate shock. I don't know that I'm over it now. I guess I at first felt as though I was a little girl that had been put out in the dark and then told that there was this monster running loose. And I had nowhere to go.
Priscilla pointed out that while Cullen's defense kept trying to smear her, she was the one who was shot back in 1976. She called the whole defense a multi-million-dollar snow job, a slap in the face of the whole judicial system.
Well, I'm still trying And I don't know that I'll ever fully understand or comprehend why this jury made the decision they did.
Despite her fears, Priscilla vows that she'll stay in Fort Worth and pursue her personal injury case against Cullen for the 1976 shooting. She did admit, though, that after today's verdict, she wants the case tried outside of Tarrant County, where she says Cullen and his money won't intimidate people. At Martell.
If you like the content of this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button to be notified when new videos are posted.